Thank you for joining me today. I'm Melissa Nielsen of Waldorf Essentials, and today we're talking about planning for grade 10. And so we had sort of planned to have a grade 10 guide done by the end of the summer, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work out. We had a super busy first part of the summer, and so now we're just sort of finishing up some of the other things that we have going. But I wanted to sort of really have the opportunity to sit down with people and answer questions, and really be able to help them if they had questions about about planning for grade 10. So if you're watching this on the download, then please just feel free to ask questions in the comments. Send me questions via email. You can get me at one of two places: waldorfessentials@gmail.com or melissa@waldorfessentials.com. You can also get me on Facebook, on the Waldorf Essentials with Melissa Nielsen Facebook there. So you can send me a message there. So I'm going to start talking today. I want to just go ahead and just really dive into it because there's a lot of information. I'm thinking this will probably take about 30 minutes, and I'm hoping that the information that I'm imparting to you will really help you as you're sitting down and planning with your planning for your teen and with your teen. So I have 5 children. I am working through grade 10 for the 3rd time. This is the first time that I've only had Waldorf at my fingertips for grade 10. So my 2 older sons, I allowed them to take some online courses for grade 10. And that was good in some ways and probably not great in other ways. So this year with my daughter, we're just following the Waldorf curriculum, exactly how it's written, and absolutely filling in with some other things that we wanted to do. So it seems like with my sons, I think one of them took a environmental class, which was a good class. It was interesting because it was kind of, you have to be careful because depending on who it's taught by, it was taught by a more conservative environmentalist. And so you didn't get all of the things that maybe I would have gotten if I had been teaching the class. I would have gone into a lot more depth. And so they got very baseline. They also both did anatomy, and that ended up being fine through the charter. So I think you really should think about, if you're replacing with outside classes, make sure that they sort of fill in where you need them to fill in, and then make notes about what works and what doesn't work. So this year with my daughter that's going to be in 10th grade, we're doing several different things, and I'll just sort of go through those. But first, I thought I would read a bit from this book. This is the Tasks and Content of the Steiner Waldorf Curriculum. And I will talk about my favorite resources here in a minute. This is not one of my favorite. It's good, but it's not one of my favorite. And I sort of said that in our grade 8 video. It's all about temperament. So for me, I prefer this other resource that I will share with you. But this has some nice snippets in it, some nice great things from teachers. And it is the way the schools are laid out. And that is generally in line with what Steiner said for the first schools, generally. Not always, but generally. I just don't like the way it's laid out. Excuse me. I sort of laughed when I read it the first time. I was like, a sanguine must have laid this book out because I was struggling with it. And so the cleric in me is like, just tell me what to do and where it's at, and I can read it about it there. But anyway, so I thought I would read this to you. It says, the class 10 age students, 16 years old. So remember, this is one of the reasons why it's really important to properly place them. 16 years old often appears different the summer holidays as different in marked ways. Often, the often tumultuous nature of class 9 has given way to a desire to know outer facts, information, and details, which requires them a new intellectual focus. Previously, students have mostly been satisfied to know how it is. Now they wish to know how we know how it is. In other words, they seek not only information, but insight. Thus, behind every question of what is the question of how, of origins. How have the things come to be as they are? Above all, students want to know how the facts relate to them personally. So it is very much, excuse me, They really spent the last few years sort of figuring out the sense of self, and now they kind of want to know, why does it matter to me? Like, what's the big deal? Why does it matter to me? How do I relate to this earth? How do I relate to those mountains? How do I relate to the climate? How do I relate to history? How do I, like, why should I be concerned about it? Why should it be important to me? And so this year, and I'm recording this in 2016, we're getting ready to have a big election. So this is actually perfect for 10th graders, because you're really sort of diving into the meat, like what America is all about. So if you're an American, this year is a really good time, especially with the election coming, a really good time to understand the electoral college, to understand the election process, to understand everything. So while they've gotten bits and pieces of it here and there, this is the year that you really dig in deep, and it actually segues beautifully with the election. Now, if you're not an American and you're working from another country, I do think that it is important to know how America works. But, America's kind of like self-centered. They want everybody to know how they work. I think it's important only because America is a world leader. I don't think that means that if you say live in Italy, you have to know everything about American government. You have to know enough about American government, and you should spend this year learning about Italian government, about your government, about what's going on in your city, your state, your country, how that works together, what kind of government you have, how it affords things to the people, how all of that works, how laws are made. You want to know that for your country. So if you are watching this again in Great Britain or New Zealand or Australia, no matter where, in Borneo, find out where and how your government works, but also know a bit about the way the American government works. So like I said, I know that sometimes Waldorf stuff tends to be very Euro-driven or America-driven. And so I want you to know that it doesn't have to feel like that. You absolutely should utilize what you've got within your own space and within your own country. So with that, I will tell you what some of my favorite resources are. And these would be planning in general, not just planning for high school. And then I'll talk about planning for high school. I'm losing things. Hold on. I'm in a smaller space than I was when I did the 8th grade one, so I have a much smaller desk. This is probably my all-time favorite book. This is the Carl Sackmeyer Rudolph Steiner's Curriculum for the Waldorf Schools. It says, an attempt to summarize his indications. I like this book because it gives pieces of his lectures, and then it tells you exactly where to find them. And some of these are ones you wouldn't find. They're hard to find. So some of them come from faculty meetings, and those are great because the faculty meetings are his meetings with the first teachers of the schools, where they're like, well, we tried what you said, and this didn't work this way. And he says, well, try this. Or, oh, no, you misunderstood what I said. So I really like those because they're like it's very personal, and it's teachers really talking to him. So I really like those. But I just like the fact that this really is a powerhouse of his work for each subject. So you can see I sort of mark mine up. I've got like Post-it flags for each subject, and then each subject is broken up into the grades. I really like the way this is laid out. I really like that you can look at what he actually said, and he even gives durations, suggested durations for main lesson blocks. So if you have used our writing your own curriculum course, we draw on this heavily because I really like using those suggested durations. That doesn't mean I always use them like in practice, but I like keeping that in mind. I go, all right, so what was he thinking? 4 weeks for this? Like, that's a lot of information. So like really being able to sort of dig into why he liked what he liked and why he suggested it. And it's good for understanding his thought process. So this, I think, especially when you get into the upper grades, this is something to really have on hand. I really wish there was a digital copy. I love my hard copy, but this is one of those that would be really nice to, on the little find box, write gardening or physics, and it would bring up all the references. That would be really nice. So I would love it if they would do digital, but they have not done a digital as of right now. So I'm just going to keep bugging people because sometimes that works. Also, I mentioned this in our grade 8 planning. I like this. This is a great resource for all the grades, for dad, for grandma, if they want to know, and it's very succinct. It's really only, let's see, it is 52 pages. and it was $6.95 from the Rudolph Steiner College Bookstore. It's called The Curriculum of the Rudolph Steiner School by Roy Wilkinson. I like it because it is an easy thing to give people when they go, I'm not really understanding this. So it's great for, like I said, grandma, and really good for dad. I think it's not very meaty. And then if dad reads this, he goes, oh, tell me more. I want to know how. Then you can give him something else and go, well, if you really want to know what he says about history, here's this whole section of the Big Blue Book. So I like this for that reason. Okay, so those are just in general planning. And again, this is a good book, this Tasks and Content of the Steiner Waldorf Curriculum. This is a good book. I'm just not crazy about how it's laid out. So I like really hesitated for a long time in buying it because I had the Big Blue Book. I can do everything I need to do without this book, but it is a good book. It does definitely have its merits. It's more modern. So you can look at what he said and what he suggested, 100 years ago for the schools, and then you can sort of see what the schools are doing. And again, schools don't always stay in line with what we should be doing homeschooling wise. There is definitely some differences, and that's really because we have the opportunity to cover more in less time. But I do like that you can sort of look up the subject in this. One thing that I want to caution is don't just look at the subjects. Like, take the opportunity to really understand the whole big picture. So listen or read all of Kingdom of Childhood, all of Discussions with Teachers. Take the time to actually learn them and understand the foundations and see it not just in the snippet. It's sort of like when somebody knows like quotes from the Bible but doesn't know the whole story. It's like super frustrating to me as a cleric. That's just me. But I would really like it if somebody could be able to say, okay, well, what's the whole story of that? I want to know all of it. I just don't want to know the snippets of it here and there. So while these books allow you to really help you with your planning, it's really good if you understand the whole big picture. There's so many really good lectures and series of lectures. Like I said, Kingdom of Childhood is really good it's a really good primer. The Study of Man is good. There's some that are really good for depth and really good at understanding sort of what he had in mind. And being where I stand now as a mom who's gone through the high school grades 3 times, I see all of these things happening. All of the things that he says, they're happening. Like when he talks about the 6th grader being materialistic, it's almost like you can see it happen before your eyes. When he talks about the changes that happen between around 14, and they start to happen a little bit at 13, but they really start to come into play at 14 with the birth of the intellect. It's like as if by magic. He really understood development. And I've worked with therapists in the past for various reasons for our kids, and so I brought some of these developmental things up, and they'll always go, that's right. This is what we see in mainstream at X age. And so it is definitely a testimony to me that he was very much onto something, and I've seen it with my own children. So take the time to really understand what he's talking about developmentally, and sort of some of the words that I said, they really want to know. In 10th grade, they want to know, not just like why, they want to know like how it relates to me, and how do you know what you know. And I've especially noticed since I've been planning for my daughter, and it is an election year, and she sees all the gobbledygook everywhere else, and it's almost like it's in the air. She says, talk to me about this. I don't understand this. She'll say, I don't understand why people don't like her, and I don't understand why people don't like him. And talk to me about what this means, what this foreign policy thing means. And talk to me about what this means about immigration. And talk to me about what this means about how she takes money, from the jail lobbyist. So she wants to know because she's reading these things. She sees them, they're headlines, she's seeing them on social media. She's hearing them on the radio. So she wants to know, so what is the deeper meaning of this? So this is a really good year. And it seems like, if I remember correctly, I was sort of thinking back on myself. I was pre-law when I went to college, and it was in 10th grade that I don't know what happened to my lighting. That was really weird. I sort of look angelic all of a sudden. Sorry. In 10th grade is when I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to understand. So I had a political science pre-law major when I was in college. And this is the time frame that I was really into it. I was really like, I need to decode this. I need to understand. And so it's just a really good time period when they start to get really engaged. So you're looking at a child that is almost 16, so 15, almost 16. So Eleanor will be 16 in January. If your child does not turn 16 by March 1st, I would say March 15th, then you really need to be thinking about ninth grade. We really want these things to really hit them the way they need to. And that doesn't mean if you're watching, you're like, oh, wait, shoot, that means I should go back to ninth grade. Maybe I shouldn't cover the election. No, cover it. Just don't cover it in the depth that you're going to cover it in 10th grade, and really help them understand everything at that point in time. So some resources that I like for planning high school. We do have Waldorf Essentials. We have a curriculum chart, and it's on our website under the free resources section. And so that's sort of a culmination of a lot of different charts. And so I always keep this, it's usually folded in my book as a quick cheat sheet. I also have, and these are available on the internet, just Google them. This is the Austin Waldorf High School curriculum, and it's just snippets. So I take this, I compare it with mine. I look at these other ones. This is the Monadnock Waldorf High School curriculum. And this is their chart. It's very abbreviated, but still most of the same content. Sometimes there's a little bit different content. So I sort of look at that. And then this is probably one of my favorites. And I'm pretty sure it's still available on the internet. This is the Shining Mountain Waldorf High School curriculum. And this is probably one of my favorites because it really actually goes into what their descriptions are for the classes. So that's super helpful in planning and sort of understanding what it is that, okay, so we're studying embryology in grade 10, like how much of it? All of it, really being able to understand what depth they are thinking that you should go through. And then that will help you really sort of lay out your blocks. Now I do use the Big Blue book by Carl Stockmeyer for a guideline on blocks. But then I also, I do the big folded piece of paper, which I don't have one right here in front of me. But, oh wait, yes I do. I do the big folded piece of paper, for all my kids. And often, this is for the first draft. I usually end up doing 2 drafts, especially since I started high school stuff again, which I guess I was never really out of high school stuff. So I just do 2 drafts because the first draft is usually right on for the younger kids, but I end up having to make some changes for the older kids. And so I've had this itchy nose all day, sorry. And so I end up sort of tweaking things. And I also we made a form a few years ago, and it's available on our site. And it's just a sort of a block plan. I'm going to hold it up here, so hopefully you can see it. And it's just it goes through the child, the time frame that you're planning to study the block, the theme of the block, outside materials that you need to order or get from the library, topics you're planning to cover, and any field trips or project and notes that you want to put together. This is what before I sit down to do the daily stuff, I do this because this is super helpful, especially in the upper grades, in breaking it down, because it's really easy to go, oh, I got to cover Greece, and I got to cover I got to cover embryology, and I got to cover physics, and I got to cover some gardening stuff, and I've got to cover. It's really easy to look at that and go, holy cow, how am I going to cover all of that? And you got to keep math going, and music going, and all of those things. Excuse me. So these block plans are super helpful in sort of laying out exactly what it is that you need. So you'll definitely want to use one of these resources in helping you put it together. But just for a view of what we've got for Eleanor for grade 10. The beginning, when I start my planning, I first step back and I go, okay, was there anything that we didn't get to in grade 9? Were there things that happens to everybody. Almost everybody I talked to didn't finish everything. You get to like the end of May and you're like, I just need to be done. I need a break. And so, so you tell yourself you're going to try to do them in the summer. And we actually had a plan to do it this summer, but we had a lot of visitors, and it just didn't work out. And a lot of fun time, a lot of traveling. So I usually go through and look at what did we not cover. So for us, I really wanted to cover the use of petroleum and gasoline and those sorts of things in grade 9, and we didn't get that far. So that's going to be a little mini block in grade 10. And I also really wanted to cover Alexander Graham Bell all the way to the iPhone, and sort of looking at how phones have changed, what the mechanisms are, how, all of it from the history of it. So I really wanted, those were two things that would take about a month that I didn't get to. And so those are immediately folded in to the grade 10 plan as I'm looking at all of the other lesson blocks. So I've already got a block plan page made for those. So, and I'm taking my notes from last year with what I wanted to use, putting that all down. So I have all of that in one place. And it's very easy then for me to pull the lessons from that. And, because I planned out the lessons fairly in depth, it's easy for me to pull those as well. So it's not a big deal. I also, I try to keep music in mind for them all year long. And so, this is a conversation that we've had. What is it that you would like to do? Would you like to just continue with the piano or would you like to add something else? She's very interested in the ukulele this year. So she's got some ukulele lessons lined up. So I look at all of those. I look at the big picture and then I'm looking at all of the pieces. She's a martial artist and she's very good at it. So that is a huge part of her life and it informs a lot of what she does. And so we don't have a lot of maybe other extra activities because she's very heavily into that. Has to be on our block plan. We have to really take those things into account. We have to take into account birthdays and birthdays and family trips and all of those things. So make sure that when you're doing your block planning, that's why this big piece of paper, this folded piece of paper that I talk about kind of a lot, is so important, because when you're writing out August, September, when you're writing all of that out, you're making sure that you put those dates in there. So for instance, we're going on a short trip to Northern California at the end of October. And, as I was sitting there looking through my things, so I was planning, I thought, oh shoot, I didn't put that trip in there. And so it's the opportunity for us to talk about as a family, how we're sort of skipping Halloween, and I'm okay with that this year, and how we're gonna make up for that. And so it was the opportunity to talk about it, and it gave me the opportunity to make sure that it was in my plan, so that I didn't plan something for that week and then have to catch up on it later. And this stuff happens. People get sick. You have an emergency where you have to go out of town, or there's a death in the family. But having the plan in place always helps you then just pick right back up. And I have a lot of people say, oh, when I come back from vacation, I just need 2 or 3 days to recuperate. But don't do it. Just have your plan in place so that when you come home, you can just pick right back up with your rhythm. Because if you wait, then it's going to be like, oh, too many more days, and then more days. And then all of a sudden your rhythm is totally off. And I find that, rhythm is really important for the little ones. But my teenager loves the rhythm, that she really needs it. It really anchors her. If she gets off, like she's talking to me about, oh man, I can't wait she has a 6 a.m. seminary class. I can't wait for seminary to start because it really anchored my day. And that's at 6 a.m. What teenager says that? So they're in a place where they still need those guidelines, and they're going to look to you for them. And if you don't have something in mind and you're not sort of providing that, then they're going to come up with their own. And that's okay in some cases, but you really want to help them to have healthy habits. I know that teenagers traditionally have really crappy sleep habits and really crappy eating habits, but helping them to see how good they feel when they eat good or eat well and when they get enough sleep is really important. And, hopefully you have a good enough relationship with your teens that you can, you still have some influence there and you can talk to them. We went this last week, to Utah to do I had a conference I was teaching at, and that's where my 17-year-old son lives. And what's amazing to me is he lived with us until he was 14. And what's amazing to me is just how everything that he learned while under our roof is still like, he knows it. He knows what he needs to do. He doesn't always do it, but he knows what he needs to do. And so, don't ever underestimate the influence you have on your kids. So, okay, next up, I thought I would just tell you what sort of what we're covering this year. And it's all based on the things that I've studied and that I know we need to cover for the year. And also, I thought I was going to say really quick, a lot of parents are starting to think high school, we end up losing a lot of Waldorf parents. And it's often because they're really stressed out about, oh, my child has to get into college. And if we don't strike now, then it's going to be a problem. Slow down. Really start to think about what is it they want to do, where it is it that you want to think about sending them to college. Find out from the college what the requirements are and work from that point. Don't work with these mythical points that you don't know the end of. If you can start to understand where it is that they want to go, what it is that they want to do, and listen to your kids. And I know I'll probably get some flack for this, but for the last probably 40 years, it's been college, college, college. And now there is this turning of where we're seeing a lot more entrepreneurs, we're seeing a lot more artists that are doing well for themselves. So I find it very important, especially for the relationship with our children, to support them in whatever it is that they want to do. So I have one child that's going to come home from his mission. He's serving a mission for our church. He's going to come home and he wants to go and go be a professor at a university. So he knows what his path is. I have another son that's a mechanic that's sort of trying to decide, does he want to do a trade or does he want to go to college and be an engineer? And my daughter, she wants to be an artist. And so she's thinking about art school. And so we sort of have to, at least I think, I'm very much a preserve the relationship mom, in that these things will be there for them forever. And I'm not going to push them into something that they're not ready for. So it's about helping them understand the balance. And, Eric's really educated. He's been to college. He's got 2 degrees. And so it's not we're not educated, so we don't want to bring that to our children. It's more of, I've really come to a place, especially in the last few years, where I just want people to follow their dreams and be happy. And that may make them $1 million. And it may be a hard lesson in, oh man, I should go back and go to college. And I want it to be because it's what they want to do, not because I'm pushing them through it. So, definitely have those conversations with your kids and ask them, what is it that you want to do? What lights your fire? Oh, by about now, something, I was thinking back on my sons. My middle son wanted to do something engineering, or something. There was a time where he just wanted to be Tony Hawk, but I think all little boys might want to do that. But he also wanted to understand the mechanics of things. He wanted to understand the mechanics of skateboards, of bikes, of understanding the physics of everything. So he's had 3 years in 2 years in a public high school where he had the ability to have a mechanics class, to have a, where he was working with somebody. And we would have provided that for him if he had stayed at home. But he had a classroom situation where he's really been able to learn much more on sort of having this mechanical mind. And when I look back on his childhood, when I think about all of the things he's ever built with Legos, all of it mechanical stuff, all of it how gears work and you sort of have an inkling of what it is that they're doing. And my oldest, he's been talking about teaching for a long time. So, really think about and have good heart to hearts, because these are good years to do that. When I can remember when I was 16, my mom and I went to tour universities and we checked it out because I was wanting to go to law school. And so that was something that lit my fire, and she was very supportive, and we just toured lots of schools. So, be in that place with them, help them to dream, and also try not to be disappointed. I think it's really important to not freak out about things. And I have no idea what the lighting is doing. So if it's showing up on your end, I'm really sorry. The lighting is really good, and then it looks really weird, and then it's really good, and then it's really weird. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. But anyway, so the things that we're covering with Eleanor this year: physics. And physics this year is speed, measured speed, velocity, things like that. And so we'll be taking a trip to Disneyland just for that, but we'll be doing a whole lot of study beforehand, knowing what, really understanding what those roller coasters are, how fast they go, what their, what their average speed is, what their maximum speed is, all of that. So when I say, oh, we're going to go do physics at Disneyland, it's sort of like a weird, we're also going to do plenty of other things. Gardening and climate is something that we're going to be looking at. We live in San Diego, so our climate is that we don't have 4 seasons, but we do have a change in what is grown and what is what works for what we have here. So even though it generally doesn't get, I think the coldest I've ever seen it is like 57, and we've lived here almost 3 years, and so that feels really cold now all of a sudden. Yeah, I'm getting old, but so we will look at sort of how food changes through the year and through the seasons, how our climate affects things, what can be grown in our climate, how our climate's different from, say, Utah or New York or Pennsylvania or Florida, and what places have, where do we get most of the food that's in the grocery store? So much of the produce aisle comes from California or from Florida. And why is that? And what things are grown in these other states? Oh, there's things that like wheat and grains are grown in these other states. Why? So it's taking botany another step deeper, and also the other parts of gardening at this point, like in a school situation, because they would have been doing gardening every year at some point in the curriculum, they would be understanding the process of using manure, and what that does to the soil. And so we'll be using some of those things in our own personal gardening. And so, definitely sort of knowing what it is that they would be doing, but they're also doing like understanding shrubs and trees. Where would you put them? Why? How would they do best? What climates do they need? So all of those things sort of roll in together. And again, this is definitely a shortened version. I think you really, if you're planning grade 10 on your own, which I would, there's no need for a package curriculum. I promise you. If you take the time to plan, then you'll just know how to do it. And it's really awesome. A lot of people go, oh, I couldn't do that. Yes, you can. We have, use this as a planning tool. We have the writing your own curriculum course that's really good and goes through some in-depth things for what each subject, excuse me. And there's a lot. You really don't need a package curriculum. You really don't. We're also doing embryology. And so that is, we'll be doing some reviews of the metabolic system and the nervous system. And then we're going to take an embryo all the way from sperm meets egg, all the way to birth. So we have, which will work out great. We have a couple of friends that are newly pregnant. And so I'm sort of looking, plus I have a midwifery background. So I'm sort of looking forward to sharing that with her. She'll be doing a research paper at the end of, I think I have it at the end of November. So spending 2 weeks on that. And this year I'm going to allow her to do a research paper on her choice. Last year, it seems like I chose, but I think we did the French Revolution last year. And so this year I'd like her to do something of her choice. And so that should be interesting. Also, we're going to spend a good deal of time on Greece, understanding Greek government, maybe some of our roots from Greek government, sort of the fall of Greece, everything that happened, like how their government worked, what happened to make it not work. Also looking at some other ancient cultures in there. It's sort of a review of ancient cultures, but you're sort of taking it from a different standpoint. It's not just about the stories. You sort of want to look at the timeline of things, and you want to understand all of the pieces. This would be a good time to pull in some really good documentaries to be able to understand some of the things that sometimes it's just really good to hear it from another storyteller. So I do a lot of documentaries in high school, but there are things that I usually watch with them so that we can discuss together. I generally do not go watch this and then have that be it. Never. Because that really ruins your credibility. So usually when there's a documentary, I try to watch it first, or at least I'll go to the IMDb and at least know the high points of it, so that there's no surprises, obviously, especially if I'm using it for school and it's for something that might be a main piece. I want to make sure I watch it first, because then when I watch it first, I can take notes, I can jot things down, and things that we know will be in our lessons later, and then we can discuss them. So a lot of discussion that goes on in high school, and that's really what makes up a lot of main lesson time. We're still doing art. We're still, doing something artistic with the material when possible, or at least having a willing component with the material. We do a lot of writing with the material. I utilize that as I want to make sure you understand this. So why don't you write for me and help me make sure that you understand the process of how an embryo becomes a baby. So maybe that is something to really think about. Also, don't really, I find a lot of moms that really stress, does my child have enough writing skills for college? There are so many online resources. And if you've been writing, especially if you've been a Waldorf mom since the beginning, if you've been writing since those grade 1 summaries all the way up and you're getting stronger and stronger, then, yes, I'm sure your child is ready. Eric used to have a service where he worked with children because he also has a journalism degree. And that's perhaps something that we may open back up for older kids so that, they can get some feedback from a writer on their work. And really that's been super helpful for our kids. So if you know somebody who's a writer, then absolutely say, hey, will you help me? Will you check this out? Will you maybe help me teach this? Because kids at this age really need experts in their field. And so it's great if you know a historian. It's great if you know a chemist. It's great if you know somebody who's, in the physics world. Those are the people you want to cultivate. So even if you're watching this and your children are younger, keep cultivating it because you go, oh, okay, I'm going to put that in the back of my head. So-and-so taught physics on the high school level for 10 years or whatever it might be. We have a dear friend who taught California history. And so you can sure bet I'm knocking down his door for Samuel, who's in 4th grade this year. So really keep those people in mind and cultivate those relationships. So other things we have, definitely politics, the timeline of American politics, because we're Americans. And within that, we're also looking at the plight of the Native Americans and sort of how that wove in there. And gosh, did they get a good deal? And maybe they didn't. And if they didn't, then let's talk about that. Let's talk about things like the Trail of Tears and what the American government did. Let's talk about how the government can get too big sometimes and sort of how that works within the structure of government and how that balances out. And then, really helping them to understand, how did we get to the way it is today? I often go, this is not the government that I studied when I was in school, because the foundations are there, but there's so much that's so wrong and different. But anyway, so we'll take an opportunity to study that. We're also doing an art, history, and poetry block. And this was one that I really wanted to do last year, and we didn't get that far, but we have some great art history museums, and Eric's actually got a minor in that. So we'll be doing, he loved art history, so we'll be doing some of those things that he'll be teaching. So, never underestimate the ability for dad to help you teach. I think that that's really important. And I think that this will be a fun block for her because she loves poetry and art. So really try to pull in things that your kids like. And that, because that really helps them connect with the material so much more. If you can pull in things that are their interests, then that's super helpful. And that goes for all the grades, super helpful for everything. Excuse me. I already sort of talked about how we're going to do a little bit on Alexander Graham Bell all the way to the iPhone and the Android, sort of like how phones work, what made them work then, what makes them different now. And then we're also going to spend a little bit of time on sort of converting oil to fuel and things like that we did not cover last year. So those are our blocks for the year. I feel like they're pretty strong and pretty tight. And what I'll end up doing next is doing another revision of this. And that's where I'm at with my planning and making sure that everything's in place. And I do pretty in-depth planning for my kids and have them have it all ready for them before school starts. So, Samuel's going to be in 4th grade. So we'll have, I've got that planning pretty much done, and got a kindergartner this year. That planning is pretty much done. So really take the time and look at your, if you're thinking, shoot, I'm going to start next week and I'm not ready, then wait another week. Put something else in that plan. Give yourself a couple extra days. Don't rush it just for the sake of starting. Also, on the flip side of that, don't wait forever just to get it perfect. So if you've got stuff in line and you can do it, then just do it. Move, go, do it, get started. Don't stress and don't wait too long. So those are my words for you today. I hope that this has been helpful. I find grade 10 to be a really fun time. This is a year when most American kids are getting their driver's license. I'm a little bit scared. But my 17-year-old drives really well, has his own car. I went to see that last week, and so that's kind of a fun thing to see as a mom. On the flip side of that, my son that's almost 20 doesn't ever want to drive. So he's my son that's on the autism spectrum, very phlegmatic, and he's like, if I can just take the train, then I don't have to even think about it. So sort of getting him used to this idea that he might not always live in a major metropolitan city and that his wife might want him to take her out sometimes might be interesting. But so this is a year of some major transitions that way. They tend to get a little big for their britches when they're 16, and you have to remind them, because they'll do I'm sure you'll hear, but I'm 16. So you need to remind them a bit about sort of where they are, and that it's okay that they're 16, and that that they're really itching to just get out in the world. We sort of joke sometimes that Eleanor really wishes she just had her own little apartment in her room, and that's not happening. But really take the time to enjoy your kids. I have really loved every bit of this journey, and sometimes it's dang hard, but I've really loved every bit of it. And it's my hope and my prayer that you do as well, that you really have a good time with your kids, and that you take the time to give them the lessons that they need so that they can really feel good about things. So that's all I've got for you today. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email. Again, you can get me at Melissa, and that's MELISA, one S, one L, at WaldorfEssentials.com. Or at WaldorfEssentials at gmail.com. That's another good way. Or grab me on Facebook. I'm usually there as well. So just feel free to tag me. And I'm happy to answer any questions for you, help you sort of guide through this process. So if you need anything, just let me know. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye now.